The meeting of the Monte Sereno City Council for September 3rd will come to order. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic for which
which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Elahi.
Present.
Councilmember LaBouvet.
Present.
Councilmember Luthold.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Lawler.
Present.
Mayor Turner.
Here. Our first order of business is presentation, and we have the proclamation of appreciation and recognition of the service of our city attorney, Kirsten Powell. Kirsten, do you want to join me up front?
Yay.
Kirsten, in appreciation for your service, I wanted to read this for the audience. Here's the mic so they can hear you. Whereas Kirsten Powell served as the city attorney for the city of Monte Sereno for 15 years, from 2004 to 2019, and the assistant city manager for 8 years, from 1996 to 2004. Kirsten has been a longtime resident of the area, having attended Saratoga High School and graduated from Santa Clara University School of Law. Kirsten, throughout, has had in-depth knowledge and expertise of law and has consistently provided legal counsel with sound advice and has given consultation to the city council and city staff. Kirsten has an unwavering dedication to upholding the core values of the city of Monte Sereno and maintaining the highest ethical standards and levels of integrity. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Monte Sereno acknowledges Kirsten for her years of commitment and outstanding service to the community and extends this appreciation of thanks and appreciation and wishes her well in her new endeavors. With that, I want each City Council member to say a few words. Let me start with Councilmember LaBouvet.
All right. Kirsten, thank you so much for all of your help and support. I haven't been here very long, but I've been a resident for quite a long time, so we've almost overlapped our whole time in Monte Sereno. Really appreciate all of the service that you've given. Thank you very much.
Yes, and thanks. I haven't been here.
Mayor Pro Tem Liz Lawler.
Thank you. I haven't been here long enough either to get to know you very well, but it's been great getting to know you, and thank you for all of your help and everything you've done for our city and your dedication.
Councilmember Luthold.
Yes, I may add my thanks, and especially as a council member this year, you've been extremely helpful in helping bring us up to speed, and especially for me. And I want to wish you the very best in your endeavors going forward.
Councilmember Elahi.
Kirsten, I think we will really miss you. I think you've guided a rookie council, basically. I don't know how many city council are faced with a city council where only, there's a couple of experience on it and everybody else is new. You were always available whenever a question needed to be asked to give us guidance, promptly respond to email. And unfortunately, when you leave us, you'll be taking a wealth of historical knowledge about the city, about its ordinances, about its regulations, and everything else that we hope we can give you a holler once in a while to ask you and help guide whoever the new city council person is. So thank you very much, and we really wish you the best.
And Kirsten, I've known you for 2.5 years, probably the longest, and this is bittersweet for me. And I also want you to know that I'm going to miss your fudge every Christmas.
Maybe I'll bring some.
And we got you something from the council and from staff. Want to open it? And we didn't pay taxes on it, but it's okay.
Oh, wow. Thank you all very much.
And then Terry will present this to you.
This is also from the city council as something for your future desks, wherever they may be, that talks a little bit about our appreciation of your dedication, your dedicated service and your commitment to this city.
Big clap. Yay. You're here.
I will just say, thank you all so much. It has been an honor and a pleasure to serve this city for the last very long time. And I've enjoyed the work that we've done over the last few months. I've really enjoyed working with the staff and the community. It's a wonderful, wonderful place. And I look forward to watching and seeing how things progress. But thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any changes to the orders of the day? Say that again?
I invite folks to stick around after the meeting.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. We have great snacks, right? I made sure that we had great snacks. So please stick around. At the end of the meeting here, we'll have, you can come up and party with us. Any changes to the orders of the day?
No changes.
Okay, so our next order of business is written communications. We have about 11 or 12 written communications from citizens, all on the user and regulatory fees, and I will summarize their input during the public hearings later on tonight. The next order of business is the consent calendar, and we have 2 items. And I know with this council, we will probably take them one at a time. Anybody would,
I was just going to say, Madam Mayor, you could always ask if people want to pull, and instead of just asking one at a time.
well, does anybody wish to speak on item 1? No?
Actually, no,
No?
for a change.
Item 2?
No.
No. So that's, do you want to make a motion?
So moved.
So moved, okay. Second?
I have a second by Councilmember Elahi, and a motion by Councilmember Elahi, and a second by Councilmember Loophole.
And we won't see that on our screens, correct?
No.
No, okay.
Now you should be able to vote.
Oh, how about that?
So have all votes in.
Yay, it's working.
Consent calendar is 5-0.
Yay, it works. We've been working for months to get the bugs out.
Councilmember Elahi is having problems seeing the attachment for your user fees. Can you?
Actually, all of us are. I don't know what happened.
I have them here.
No, I mean, for some reason, it's not, on
I mean,
the
it's,
website it posts, but on the Granicus app, it's not popping up.
okay.
Isn't that weird?
If you want to take a break for a second, I can try to reload it and see if,
No, I-
okay.
You can always just go on to the cityofmontesereno.org and just pull it up directly through the, I noticed the same thing. I just tried to pull it up.
So may I go on? Yes. Okay. So the next item of business is public hearings. This is going to be on the user and regulatory fees, consideration of the approval of an updated schedule of users and regulatory fees. This is a continuation of the public hearing we had on August 20th. If any member of the public would wish to speak, please fill in your speaker cards. I think we have 3. So let me call on staff to present a briefing on this item. Gary?
All right, this is a return of an item that was first presented 2 weeks ago at the city council meeting, where the consultant that has been assisting us with the larger effort last year, that including the full-blown study, as well as the recommended incremental change for this year, came and presented and gave the council some background information on the larger fee study that was conducted last year and the result of all of that. And we, of course, the council received public input, and at the end of the hearing, the council requested that staff do additional outreach to the public, which we did. We sent out a request for folks to provide additional input. On Nextdoor, we used our general distribution email list for an e-blast, and we also posted it on the city's website. And and from that, we did receive some additional correspondence with some specific points within those correspondence. So basically, in the staff report, staff just went and took there was basically groupings of comments, and so in the staff report you'll see that staff grouped the comments, the general ones as well as the more specific ones, and gave some discussion. Unless you want me to go about each one of them, I'm just going to refer you to the staff report. If you'd like me to, I can certainly go over those.
So before you do that, what I have here is I made a written summary of each written communication that the council has received. So I want to go through that this evening.
Okay, I mean, I did do that myself and then put it within the staff report.
Yeah, the staff report is not showing up on here either.
Yeah, it's not,
No, I know, and I don't know why. If you'll just open your browser and go to cityofmontesereno.org.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that.
Yeah, I have no idea why that one report is not showing up, because it is online.
All right. Sounds
Yeah, and if you'll just click under the upcoming agendas, you can look at it through there.
okay, are you done?
Sure.
Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to summarize the written communications from our constituents in the order in which we received them on the user and regulatory fees. Number one, we received 2 letters from Philippa and Jack Alves. And Philippa says we need to get citizens' input before fees are raised. We need to use actual costs, not CPI. And she rejects both resolutions for August 20th and September the 3rd. Ruth Nelson, she says the government should live within their means, just like an average family, no raising yearly fees. Dale and Florence Barrett, the city manager should not have the authority to raise fees. Joan Silverstein, nothing should be passed without a survey and citizens' input. Kathy Smith says the city manager proposes increases to fees, but the council should approve fee increases. Vincent Lum, the citizens should be informed of pending fee increases first, and their input should be considered. Michael Diadio, fee increases should be on costs, not discretionary. The city manager should not have the authority to raise fees. Lon Allen, the city manager should propose fee increases to the council, then the city council votes to approve these increases. Again, it would be the council who has the authority to increase fees, not the city manager. Ed Turner, the city is forecasted to recover 92% of fee-related service in the year 2018 to 2019. Automatic fee increases every year is unnecessary, especially without a comprehensive analysis, community input, and rigorous debate. Using CPI based on a basket of goods and services for San Francisco is not relevant. The use of a consumer price index, a CPI, is inappropriate to estimate Monte Sereno fee-related services. It is the job of the city manager and the city council to increase productivity and service levels, yet keeping expenses and fees in check. Fees should be approved by the council and not at the discretion of the city manager. Susan Ng and Paul Levine. We are opposed to the adoption of the 9-3 resolution. City council has economic skin in the game. They should make the final decision. Fees should not be changed at the discretion of the city manager. The city council should approve changes in fees. We are opposed to increases based on a general index such as CPI, unrelated to Monte Sereno. Monte Sereno was founded on minimal government input with a hands-on community. Please do a study and learn from the successes and mistakes of other cities. So the public, well, let me open it up to the council first for discussion. Anyone in the council?
Should we do a public hearing first? and
Do we
then-
do a public hearing first, or we open it up?
We do get questions
Yeah, we get
from the council.
Let's
questions
questions
first.
from council.
Is that okay?
Yeah, no.
Okay,
And then will there be time to comment after
yes.
public hearing?
So after, so we do a public hearing, we do a question session from council, we do a public hearing, and then back to the council, and then we will close the session. So first, does anybody want to speak first?
So I guess one question I had for Kirsten, you'd responded about a couple of alternatives to some of my questions. Could you maybe explain, for everybody's sake, what the alternatives that we might consider tonight are?
So the, obviously the issue that's been recommended, it was done as part of the study last year, was the CPI. I did, after a conversation with Councilmember Luthold, we did reach out to Terry Marsden, who was from the firm that did the study, and asked if there were other ways to do it. He did strongly recommend the use of the CPI because it accounts for more than just a straight salary staff adjustments. It could dealing with consultants, other service providers that we use in such a small city. I know there was discussion about possibly using particular staff members who might be involved in the various fees. The difficulty with that is each fee is different. It depends. It could be a finance fee. It could be a planning fee. So you'd have a different calculation for each fee. So Mr. Marsden's recommendation was perhaps to this year approve it with the CPI, which was recommended in the full-blown study that was prepared last year. And then next spring, prior to your hearing on the fees, adjusting fees is an annual process. So next spring, you could look at other mechanisms to look at adjustments. It may mean no adjustments, it may be CPI, it may be something else, but you would have more options to consider that may be things that seem more relevant for Monte Sereno.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah,
Councilmember
there are some
Elahi?
points, yeah, there are some questions that create some ambiguity. I just wanted to clarify it. Will the fees be raised when Terry decides they be raised, or is it the city council that is going to make that
No,
decision?
so the city council makes the decision. Only the city council can adjust the rates after a public hearing. So the recommendation in the study, the fee study that was done in 2018, was that the city manager come back to you with the adjusted fees based on CPI. So the city manager does not have the authority, nor was he given the authority to adjust the fees at all.
And generally speaking, the CPI index that's being used, is the inflation in Monte Sereno less or more than the CPI, or about the same? Any thoughts on that?
Well, as noted in the staff report, because there was some question about the CPI index that is used, the reason why the one that was chosen was used is because last year there was a change from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, new geographic area samples in 2018, which removed Napa, Santa Clara, Sonoma, and Solano from what was then called the San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose area, and renamed the new geographic area San Francisco, Oakland, and Hayward. And I did speak to Terry briefly about this. It was his belief that the CPI for that, is so close and so relevant to us here in Monte Sereno because of the Bay Area as a whole that it's a reasonable indicator to use.
One of the questions some of the letters raised were that the professional, Terry Marston, I guess is his name?
Madsen.
He's making money for himself by asking us to use the CPI. Is he making any money when we use the CPI, or does he
No,
get paid when we do a
no,
complete survey?
No, the consultant has no vested interest in whether the fees are raised or not, or profits or benefits from it in any way.
All right, thank you.
Any more? Councilmember Elahi?
No, I'm good.
We're done. Anyone else?
I'll save my comments for later.
Anyone else? No? Okay. So let me now open the public portion of the hearing. Our first speaker is Philippe Alves.
Thank you all. Actually, when I read the agenda and realized there was going to be a party for Kristen, I thought, this is a meeting I don't want to miss.
Good to have you here.
Thanks for all the help you've been, for all of us. I have spoken before, and I'm sure you all know my stand and my points. I will reiterate them, and basically, when the mayor read the surveys from the letters, I think that the majority of letters actually just says what I would say to you today. First of all, Monte Sereno was never conceived as a town like other towns, which all of you probably realize by now. And it's certainly not like San Francisco and the other towns that are recommended in the CPI. This is not a similar situation in any way. I do think that we should be looking at possibly the resolution of May 2018 and to delete the paragraph, whereas the city council desires that annually the fees be automatically increased. I think that's the sixth paragraph. I think that should be removed. We do not want anything automatically changed. We're a little town. We're a village, actually. And the city fathers from long ago would be turning over in their graves if they thought that we were doing and taking any action like this. I also feel that anytime we do want to, and I'm not against totally increasing fees, if we do a study to be sure that we need the fee increased. I'm not saying it should never, I am saying it should never be automatically and annually done. I also think the section 3, the fee schedule, should be omitted, deleted. That does not apply to a town like Monte Sereno. We should actually have a cost study, it may possibly every 3 years, not of the CPI index, because as one of the letters already pointed out, the annual cost of service fees are being met primarily by the permit fees that are currently given. And that's my input for this afternoon, or this evening.
Perfect timing, 3
Thank you.
minutes. Thank you. Our next speaker is Skip Pearson from Becky Lane.
I'm not very good at speaking, so I wrote down my comments. They'll only last a minute. I shouldn't get that noise. I moved here back in 1979, and about 20 years removed from when the city was founded by an admiral, retired admiral, and his supporters. And it was based on low cost and limited government, small government. That was the reason why Monte Sereno was incorporated. So just my inherent feeling is to automatically increase, and by the way, never decrease, is in the language, city fees according to any index is contrary to those principles the city was established with, much less tying fees to a high and highly fluctuating urban CPI, which is a cost price index. The city council should maintain control over all fee increases. And if I can repeat what ex-mayor Lon Allen emailed to the council. With respect, I would treat fee increases the way that the city treats the annual budget. The city manager makes a proposal to the council, which is normal in any city. And then the council votes to approve in whole or in part or not at all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Our next speaker is Ed Turner.
Okay, it looks like the opposition to these fees is pretty much uniform based on the responses you've gotten. And I'd just like to speak to why, in my opinion, that is the case. I don't think people are objecting so much to the fees per se as they are objecting to the mechanism that's being proposed for managing them. Things like this should not be easy to be raised. It should be difficult. They should never be put on autopilot. As California taxpayers, I think we're all used to being uniformly disregarded by the political establishment in Sacramento. But when we see that happening at our local city level, it's particularly offensive. And I think that's what people are reacting to. Tying these things to the CPI, in my opinion, is absurd. CPI is a weighted average of cost of goods and services in Sacramento. Our fees are largely a function of our personnel expenses and maybe some outside consultant expense. But those, as Daniel pointed out last time, those costs are all very knowable, and I don't think it's difficult to figure out what your cost increases are and to apply them across to the fees. I don't think it takes a $20,000 study. I think this is more like sixth grade math. So, again, any resemblance to the San Francisco CPI and Monte Sereno's cost of these fees, I think, is purely coincidental. The other thing is putting this authority in the hands of the city manager. And I'm not casting aspersions on the city manager here. I just think that when you're sticking your hands in somebody's pocket, it should be done by the people who are accountable to those who have the pocket you're picking. I think it should be the council that does some work here, and makes this happen and approves it and is responsible for it, because you're the people who are immediately accountable to the residents, and you have to live with the rules you pass. And that's not the case with the city staff. So, again, I would suggest that I think you can easily figure out what our costs are. If we're actually already recovering 92% of those costs, you don't even need to do this thing every year, it seems. I think if you did it every 2 or 3 years, you'd probably be fine. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't have any more cards. Are there any speakers out there? No? Oh, there's one more. Ms. Nabida Alahi?
Hello, everyone. Other speakers have already voiced most of my feelings, so I'm not going to repeat that. But I will reiterate that I would like the fees not to be raised. Okay.
Thank you. So seeing that we have no more speakers, let me take the discussion back to council. Watch what you say, because your wife is here.
I'm not going home today, I guess. It's great to live in the city. You know, people are really concerned and involved with what's going on. Our job as city council, obviously, is to dig deeper and get more into the facts and see what's good for the city. And sometimes we may agree with the city citizens, and sometimes we may not. But every comment that everybody has made is appropriate comment, and it should be considered. There is a lot of confusion about the resolution. I just want to clean that up. I mean, there seems to be an emphasis that the city manager should not be deciding, and the resolution makes it clear it's not the city manager who's going to be deciding. I asked that specific question of Kirsten, and she responded, it is not the city manager. The other issue is whether the CPI is a good place to go or not. One question I may need to ask is, when was the last time we did a survey and raised the fees and permit? Do you know when that was done?
Yes, it was last year when the city did a comprehensive, it was called a user and regulatory fee study.
And that was done after how many years?
It was more than 10 years.
And how much was the fee raised as a result of that study?
I
What
don't know
percentage approximately?
the exact amount, but it was in order to recover as much as possible the cost for service, the fees had to be raised considerably. And that is part of the, reason for having these small incremental increases in between fee studies is to, I would say, reduce what you would call, could call sticker shock for when we come around to do them the next time.
So the key word is sticker shock. At some point, these fees may have to be raised, or they may not. I mean, we may not need to do that. And you're trying to eliminate that sticker shock, that instead of 3% a year, you wait 3 years, and you raise them 10%, and that becomes a big jump. And you're trying to avoid that, and that's why they were raised after that. And the question about doing a study is a good one, but the studies they are expensive. Last time they did, the cost was about $20,000, as I understand. And the professional who was here, he recommended not doing a study because he didn't want to charge us his $20,000, and he was not making any money by doing this approach. I mean, I analogize it to a packet of chewing gum. I mean, who's going to, if somebody chews gum, do you want the guy who chews the gum to pay for the gum, or do you want the rest of the citizens of Monte Sereno to pay for it? If you raise the permit fees, then the person who applies for the permit, if he's got a $10,000 permit fee, then, and I don't know if what's the average permit fee approximately?
It varies wildly.
So let's say it's $10,000. His fee would go up by $300. So he's, but if he doesn't pay, then the rest of our citizens are paying the fee. So all of Monte Sereno ends up paying that fee because that's money in the general fund that now goes to support the permits. So it's, in a sense, the person who's chewing the gum, we're buying him the gum. So if the citizen of Monte Sereno, and that's the spirit of Monte Sereno, maybe we want to see the development, we want to see more houses being retrofitted, and maybe we want to encourage that, and that's why we're willing to support that person's chewing gum habit, and we all want to pay for it. If that's what we want to do, that's what the citizens of Monte Sereno want, then that's the course we should take. But I think we should need to understand that. That's what's happening. It is not that, and the amount is so small. When you're talking about $20,000 a year in increase in fees, which comes to about $20 per household, which is why I'm saying if the citizens of Monte Sereno want to contribute the $20 out of their pockets, that's fine, and let the person who's building his $1 million home save his $30,000 or $3,000 or whatever he saves on the fees. I think we can look at the resolution, make it clear that it's not the city manager who's going to be moving the fee increase. What's before us is now not tied to the CPI. It's a simple question of do you want to raise it by about 3%? And we're not really raising it 3% on everything. There's a lot of permits that are not being raised, like tree cutting and others. So it's only a few things that are being raised, which pays for the cost of us reviewing the permits, getting the inspector out, and everything else. So either the person who's applying for the permit, the person who's chewing the gum pays for his gum, or the rest of us do. And that's really the choice we have before us today.
By the way, Councilmember Elahi, if you don't have a place to stay tonight, you're welcome to stay over.
I am here to serve the city. And my wife is doing the same. She's serving the city too, by coming up saying her thing.
Okay, anybody else?
I have some comments, but mine's quite detailed, so maybe I'll go last. If that's okay?
Councilmember
Yeah.
Lawler?
So I'll yield to someone else if they
Well,
want
let's
to.
go with
Sure.
Mayor Pro Tem Lawler.
Sure. I can agree. I mean, to an extent that we do subsidize, our taxpayers do subsidize our neighbor's building. And the question is, how much are our taxpayers willing to subsidize? So that's a question. But I also understand, that although fee increases inflation are a fact of life, our city is so small and unique that a CPI based on San Francisco doesn't make sense, and it would be great if it could be fully tailored to us. And ultimately, the council maintains the authority to approve or not approve these fees. But at the end of the day, with all of this resident input, with the response regarding the increased cost basis for these fees, as well as a request to hold a public hearing or a public community meeting where we can gather more information, I feel and since these fees wouldn't go into effect until November 4th, I feel that it's prudent to postpone this topic for further review, so that we can get better clarity, get more input from our residents, and then we can make a better decision for the people we represent. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. And since you want to go last, I'll go next.
Okay.
Oh,
And then-
you didn't go?
I didn't go.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, I mean, I fully understand that Monte Sereno is about small government and a different type of town. I'm in this office because I feel that way as well. And we really do have something special here. What I also hear is a general sentiment that we would like to choke the government to death by not funding it. And that's a political position, and it's certainly one that fits well with Monte Sereno's idea of leave us alone, we want to be a very small town and do this. However, we are not able to choke the Monte Sereno budget down. This council is working very, very hard to limit the growth in the budget and to find places where we can control that budget and limit it. And yet it grows year over year. Especially healthcare costs grow, pension costs grow, staff salaries naturally grow, and the cost of everything we buy in the city and the services we use, the pavement cost, all of these things grow. So this issue comes down to a question of, it's very simple, this cost of doing business for the same remodels, the same building permits, is going up about $25,000 a year. And the idea of these step increments is to recover that from the person who is specifically getting the benefit. Flipping that around, the question is as Councilmember Elahi said, basically, do you, each and every citizen, want to pay $20 a year more each year for the 3 years for your neighbor's building permit? Because that's coming out of your taxes that go into the general fund, or do we want the person with the building permit to pay the naturally increased costs? So it's $20 a year. Are you happy having $60 less at the end of the 3 years when we go and do the study? Or would you rather we have some sort of look at the increased costs that the city experiences? The increased costs, Councilmember Lavouvet will probably have these more accurate. I've been throwing out the number 9%. That's actually low. So our costs year over year from last year to now are at least 9% increased in the relevant areas. 3% is not even close to recovering that. So we could choose to recover nothing, but it's not going to choke the government down. It's simply going to mean that we as citizens are funding the developers or the remodelers' permits. And as Councilmember Elahi said, this is targeted, what's been proposed to the council to look at, has some priorities in it. So things like tree permits that we think are positive to get rid of non-native trees, those permits are either continuing to be free or staying at the same cost for the regular tree permits. There are several other targeted things where we say we want to support that as a community. So we're looking at that. So as mentioned, I'm for some sort of step adjustment. We're not going to capture everything, but rather than waiting for several years while we each pay for the developers or the neighbors who are getting the benefits. I think we should be stepping this up in a sensible way so that people who receive benefits from the city pay. It's 92% cost recovery, you can say that's close enough for last year, but it's going to be something significantly lower than 92% until we have a big jump up after the next salary survey. So I'm for us finding a method to do this, even if it's just a round number, because it's going to be short of the actual cost increase, no matter what number we pick, less than 10%. That's my comment.
Okay, and so let me get on to what you just said, and let me add on to it. I think that what we should do is to increase cost based on actual cost and not CPI. And that's my stand. Councilmember Labouvet?
So,
I understand you have a presentation to do?
yeah, so I can actually do it from there because then I
Okay,
can plug into
please.
the projector. I'll just make a brief comment. I agree with kind of the resident sentiments, but I didn't know if that was going to carry the day. So I did a very detailed data analysis, and so I'll bring more of an engineering view to, or an analytical view to what is actually going on with these numbers. And actually, I think, so I have two people to convince, and I think you'll be very surprised at what the data actually shows with respect to this analysis.
You can still come to my house after this.
No, I'm fine. I'm
So-
with you guys, whichever way you want to go.
So I did put a presentation together because the number trail is actually a little bit complicated, but it's all in your packet. And so, the data is sitting right in front of us, but you actually have to do quite a bit of analysis work to actually paw your way through it and understand what's going on. So let me just sort of fire this up. And since we're now professionals at using this projector.
Got to give.
You can go more into presentation mode. Oops. Nobody look at my password. Can I unplug you, Terry? Mux it over to second. Did you, is the input changed? Did you do that? Auto detect. Yay. Okay. Let me go into presentation mode. Okay, so I think what's really before us is there was a resolution that was passed on May 1st, and in that resolution, it basically had embedded in it this clause down here where it basically says exactly by the CPI. But, my question is this good policy? And so let's dig through the data and explore whether this is actually good policy or even the right policy for Monte Sereno. So it all really boils down to kind of one item that's been floating around in both the study report that was published in March of 1918 and now also kind of repeated many times in the room. So in order to generally maintain pace with regional cost inflation and city salary cost inflation, the city should adjust its fees on an annual basis. That's really what we're talking about. And do we know if that's even a true statement? So we can believe it's true, and it seems like a reasonable statement, and it's been said a lot of times, so it actually may be true, but has anybody actually shown that there's a causality to that statement that can be defended? And so what I would like to do is walk through the numbers and show that that statement actually is not true. So while this may be true under some conditions, So I'm not saying that it can never be true, and so I don't think the consultant was doing something malicious. It just turns out that, and it can be true in some municipalities, for us, and if we walk through our numbers, it's not true. So if we look at the study, and now, so if you kind of flip to your study in the packet, and you have to kind of dig through one of the appendices, and there's an Appendix E, and an Appendix E is really where the main methodology is laid out. And so what this does is it walks through. Yeah, this was in the packet. So this Appendix E was actually in the packet. And what I did was I walked through the detailed analysis that the guys doing, the consultant did in order to derive user fees. And in this basically is what defines a calculation methodology. And in this methodology, there's basically 7 main components to what derives a user fee. So yes, there is salary, and so we've been talking about city salary cost of inflation, but that's not the only component. You know, there's also benefits, which is also kind of lumped in to this, and benefits are pension, medical, and other benefits. But there's also citywide overhead, targeted recovery goals, and direct hours. So resource hours applied to fee-related services. And how those factor into calculating fees is very relevant to, do the fees go up or the fees go down? And so I'll just note here that salary is only one of the 7 terms influencing the fee rate. And if you look at in the schedule, and I've got this actually in a subsequent slide, but if you look at, for example, in the city planning domain, and it's basically, he used the same methodology to calculate fees times 3. And it's actually a very simple calculation because we only have 1 employee per department, per domain, and that basically defines all of our fee-related services. But if the first one that came up was city planning, so I use that as a guinea pig, and it's pretty, the numbers are pretty similar for all 3.
What page are you on?
This is Appendix E, page 5.
Okay, thank you.
You know, the derived hourly rate that was used to calculate all of the fees is about $194 per hour. And if you look at what the actual fee, the salary-based fee is on the subsequent page, or on the previous page, it's only about $55 an hour. So that's only 1/4 of the total dollars per hour used to calculate the fees. Put that back on. So I've got a lot more data, though. Let's walk through the numbers. So here's the actual schedule of calculation that came from the fee study. And you can see this is just a simple breakdown of number of hours worked, subtracting out vacation hours, but then calculating in cost of the labor, so basically salary, but then also calculating cost of the benefits. So let's just take a quick look at salary, pension, medical, and other benefits. So if we first look at salary, Monte Sereno has no unions. Our year-over-year salary costs have no dependency on CPI, right? I think everyone can agree that CPI is not related. So the city council, based on a previously voted fee structure or salary structure, voted to keep that policy in place, and we approximately raised salaries by 5%, right? That had nothing to do with CPI. Our pension costs are dependent on Great Recession losses and investment returns. So CalPERS has nothing to do with CPI. I mean, CalPERS is setting those rates not based on some inflationary cost of living index. They're basing that on what do they need to recoup their costs and pay their actuarial fees. Medical costs happens to be an independent variable in the CPI calculation, but it's not the other way around, right? It doesn't work the other way. So you can't say that CPI drives medical costs. It's actually medical costs happen to be a component of CPI, and you know, full stop. It's not, the relationship doesn't go the other way. Other benefits that we pay our salaries or our employees are fixed, right? We have a fixed fringe and a fixed car allowance. Those are fixed. They have no relation to CPI. So I think that that these first categories, salary, pension, medical, and other benefits, I would challenge that have no relation to CPI. Using CPI as a metric to evaluate how they're increasing just has no scientific basis, right? I would prefer Sean's method of let's just pick a number out of thin air, because that has more relevance than trying to index it and pretend that there's science behind something that there is not. So, I'm good at spreadsheets, so I went and actually did some calculations and said, okay, so what exactly are we spending on fee-related services? And so I was able to, because, each of these departments only have one person in them, I can go add up like anybody else, what are we spending year over year? So 2018-19, we spent about $400K, and in 2019-20, we're spending about $420K. So the change was $12,000 for a net increase of about 3%. So again, not related to CPI, happens to be 3%. That 3% is mostly driven by the fact that the building official was maxed out in his range, didn't get a raise, right? Otherwise, this would have been easily a 5% delta here. If you then go look at the year-over-year cost of benefits, I don't have the specific data, and in 2019, there were people coming in and out, but you can say there's a relationship between the amount of salary paid to the benefits paid, so that percentage still holds. So that's still a sign, or that's a valid way to calculate. So what I calculated was total benefits and divided by full regular time pay, and came up with a percentage of what is the percentage of benefits to salary. And so in 2019, the actual, so this is coming from the report in the last session so I'm using the actual data from end of 2019. Our benefits compose about 40% of the salaries. In 2019-20, from a budget perspective, we're spending about $41,000, right? So, or 41%. So that year-over-year increase is also kind of in this 3% range, 3.2% range. So if you then go multiply those salary percentages by what we know the fixed cost of the labor is, we can get to a total cost of labor. And lo and behold, it happens to be, if you look at the delta, year-over-year delta, it happens to be about the same amount as we're looking to recover in this. I calculated 22. The city report was saying something like 23. That shows that the data is kind of aligning, and we're both on the same track. What you can note, though, is that so the increase that is uncovered here is almost 4%. So, and that's pretty close to CPI. But it's coincidence that it's related to CPI. It has no scientific relation to CPI. It happens to be a coincidence that 4% increase in our labor rates exists. But that's not the end of the story. We need to keep going, because there's way more components to this data than just this salary piece. So now let's look at citywide overhead, and this is where it really gets interesting. So this is a piece of data that would be easy to look over or gloss over. So again, this is Appendix E-5. If you look at the way they're actually calculating this, the first thing that you have to do is, this first column here, where it says cost of labor, this is the number from the previous chart, where we were just calculating what is the full cost of labor, and then it's divided by, it's segmented by a couple of different categories. The next thing that happens, though, is that we calculate and assign overhead, so citywide overhead. And the reason this is important, so basically, what is this number? So it's all of the items that are sitting in general and administration categories in the budget that are cost items that are like facilities and equipment, and I'm sure that the contractor costs are lumped in here. So it's all of the other expenses that are citywide related that get lumped into these services under the rationale that, hey, the 3 employees, they occupy some amount of this building, and some of those building expenses and overhead expenses need to be assigned to them, and so it's fair to deduct that, even if you have a home office, that's fair to do on your taxes. So there's a considerable overhead that gets calculated here. And if you look at the percentage of numbers, so the labor is roughly 65% of the total number. But in terms of cost of services, that's like $70,000. That's like 35% of the number. And so already cost of services is a pretty big percentage. And if cost of services is swinging around, the multiplier is 35%. So now, so the next point is really around what is actually happening in this year over last year. And so we already, on the previous page, said that things are going up by, $23,000. But, I can just look at one line item in the general overhead category in the city budget, and I picked out line item 765, contract services, and I noticed that, we're reducing the fees here from 111 or almost 112 $100,000 to $80,000. So a net reduction of almost $32,000, right? That one reduction alone in the upcoming forecast completely cancels out the increase in fees, right? So now if we just stopped here, we would be at net no increase in fees is needed because, we had a plus and we had a minus in the column, and now it all nets out. So is that understood? So this cost of labor is important, and so you have to know on a year-over-year basis, is your cost of labor or your overhead, so is your cost of labor moving? Yes, we've already agreed that cost of labor is generally increasing by something like 3 to 4%, but you also have to look at cost of city overhead services in doing this calculation. Are those increasing or decreasing? And that's certainly not tied to CPI, right? There's no relationship. Most of those costs are actually fixed because they're facilities costs. The next place to look is the next column. So what the next thing they do is they take the fully burdened costs that are reduced and selectively applied to various work package categories which relate to fee categories. And there's no dependence on CPI here. So if you I don't know if you've actually looked at this chart, but where the total is, this is the fully burdened costs. So it's salary plus benefits. Next column is city overheads. These are both added together, and you get a fully burdened cost in this column. And then the following column, you basically take a percentage. So this is where city policy comes into play, where we're saying on a category by category basis, sometimes we apply, we don't want to collect the fee. Sometimes we want to collect a percentage of the fee. Sometimes we want to collect 100% of the fee. And that basically is what drives the recovery amount that we want to recoup from fees. So the next big driver here to note is this little category down in the bottom here called direct hours. And so direct hours is, so based on the fiscal year project pipeline forecast of what kinds of projects are coming in to the city, direct hours are estimated to complete fee-related work packages, right? So this makes sense. So, in last year, there was a certain amount of work that was fee-related that had to get done. City employees estimated number of hours that it would take to do that work. This year, it's a different amount of hours that it takes to do the work because the nature of the work is different. So if from year to year that was constant, then okay, we could ignore it, but it's not constant. So, and here's a really important point is that increasing direct hours will have the effect of spreading the fixed costs over more work packages. So think about that for a minute. So we have a bunch of fixed costs. So some of the costs are variable, right? Salary and things like that. So every time a new piece of work comes in, yeah, the salary component, it remains constant. But there's these fixed costs, there are facilities costs and city overhead costs that are actually distributed among whatever the existing work product is for that given year. And that if it changes from year to year, that ratio of monies that are applied and smeared across those categories changes. And so you have to take a look at what your pipeline forecast is from year to year to know if your fees are actually going up or down. And you can also note that the amount of recoverable fees divided by the direct hours is the dollar per hour that is used to directly calculate the fees. So basically the way fees are calculated in the next page is each fee work product is multiplied by the dollar per hour, and that equals the fee amount. So what's happening with our fees, or sorry, what's happening with our licenses and permits? So we know that Hacienda is being built. You know, right out of the city budget, we know that this category is increasing by 37%. That has a huge swing on fees. And so if we look at a year-over-year forecast, and so I also did the numbers and got to pretty much the same number as what the budget says, is that, you know, in the previous discussion, we found out that in the license and fees categories, business license, construction tax, and low road impact fees are not included. But if you add the other fees up and then do a difference, year-over-year difference, you get to about 38%. So basically our work pipeline has increased by 38%. So that means that the amount of fixed fees that get distributed over that larger quantity of work product is now different, right? So in actuality, the fees, you know, if you just considered this one category, the fee should actually decrease, right? Because now you're distributing a fixed amount of overhead over more work packages. So I'll just make sure I've made all my points. So year over year, 2019 fees are forecasted to increase 37%. This has to be added to direct hours, right? So you can't just forecast in your budget that you're increasing the fees by 38% and not somehow reconcile that with this number that is in the calculation of direct hours. And so if you just do a back of the napkin calculation and say that the $220K of additional revenue divided by the hourly rate, you know, is going to equal about 1,041 hours. And so if you notice that, you know, and a full work year, a person work year is 1,596. That's like 65% of a work year for one of our employees. And so I made another kind of simplifying assumption that say, hey, let's say that work is divided by 3 and it's equally spread across each of the departments. So that basically says that each of the departments, their direct hours is now going to increase by 347 hours. So that's an additional 2 months of work per person that fixed fees are going to be distributed over. If you kind of do the math, this results in almost a 29% reduction in the fee dollar per hour. So this one piece alone completely swamps out any discussion about, you know, 3 or 4%. There's a 30% swing in how the fees are in basically this component of the fees. So if you want to kind of conclude, so I hope that data trail was clear. If not, you know, we can really dig in and do a more deep dive on that. But you know, the points that I want to make is that there is no dependency on CPI. CPI is an unrelated metric, right? We might as well be using GDP or, you know, amount of time it takes to travel from here to my house, or, you know, CPI is just, it's a nonsensical use of that metric. So let's just agree that CPI is just the wrong metric, period. You know, based on this data analysis, you cannot assume that fees will automatically and annually increase based solely on the city's salary cost of inflation. So I'm not saying that it can't increase based on that. So if those other components of the fee, for example, pension, medical benefits, citywide overhead, targeted recovery goals, if those all stayed flat year over year, okay, then salary would have an impact. But you know, you have to actually examine all of the components of the fee structure to really come to the right answer. The fees need to reconcile to the work hours, period. They have to reconcile. It's by law. You cannot overcharge And you cannot charge for services that you're not rendering, right? The whole purpose of this fee arrangement, and the whole purpose, if you kind of look back through this analysis, is that, you know, in the subsequent pages, they did a sanity check where they tried to double check. They estimated how many work packages in each fee category were going to get done, and then kind of back calculated to make sure that that hit their recovery rates in the correct quantities, right? And so, you know, what I would have liked to see from that consultant, rather than come in and do a glossy PowerPoint, was dig into the numbers and recalculate, you know, those, you know, and redo just that small piece of the analysis and make sure that what we're proposing in terms of fee increases actually makes sense. And he would have found what I've found is that it just doesn't. It doesn't, the math doesn't hold. So the fees need to reconcile to the work hours. So if citywide overhead or direct hours change, it's a significant impact to fee dollar per hour that can't be ignored and the resulting fee schedule. The next piece of the conclusion is that it is necessary to carefully evaluate the following fee dependencies prior to adjusting the fee schedule. And we just haven't done that, right? The guy didn't do the full job. So now for me, I think this is a great analysis. I think that his approach was correct up until the point that he recommended the off year, just use some factor to multiply the end result by something and get the right answer. That is just poor science. The actual methodology here is quite simple to follow. You know, I followed it in a couple of afternoons, and I think that anybody with even a basic business or accounting background could reproduce these fee schedules and actually calculate the number correctly on an annual basis. It doesn't have to be contracted out. You know, I would have given this to a junior engineer to work on by taking him a couple days, but I don't think, this is not rocket science. You know, the variables here is really the forecasting, and the forecasting of these work packet amounts was done during the budget process. And so you could have come to a very different conclusion had you actually looked at all of the data. So then what's the next step? So I'm going to go back to the beginning of my presentation where, you know, what was the policy and how do we change the policy? So what I'm recommending is, again, we start with the previous policy and say, hey, you know, it's just poor science. You know, part of this policy was accepted on face value, but, you know, now we've shown that there are some data dependencies here that just swing wildly and differently than CPI. So we should delete these clauses that are CPI related, and we should add a couple of new clauses that basically say that, you know, every 3 to 5 years, or a frequency deemed appropriate when proposed by the city manager and approved by the city council, the city shall commission a study to examine fee-related services by the city, and then I stole some language from earlier on. The cost reasonably borne by the city in providing those services, the beneficiaries of those services, and the revenues produced by those paying fees and charges for special services, and recommend to the city council for review and appropriate revised schedule of fees to recover those costs on an ongoing basis. So that's number one. So basically what I'm recommending is that we do a proper analysis at least once every 3 to 5 years, or more often if we deem appropriate. And secondly, you know, the one fee that is not included in our current schedule is the charging station, and we should, you know, immediately add that to our to the policy. So my recommendation is that we make a motion to modify the previous resolution in this following way. That concludes. I hope I didn't bore everybody to death, but it is a detailed set of numbers, and you really have to dig into the details to figure out what are the driving components, what are the ratios of the numbers, and what numbers are actually affecting the outcomes. And so this is pretty basic, you know, it's data analysis 101. I'm surprised that the consultant didn't, you know, oversimplified and just made some gross assumption that, hey, it's good enough just to multiply by some, you know, random index the final fees. It's just not that, it's not that simple, but again, it's also not that complex. we should do the job right or not do it at all.
Thank you so much. I'm going to do something here. I'm going to open it up to the public to see if you have any more comments. Yes, Mr. Pearson.
We weren't trying to strangle government increased.
You want to come up to the podium, please?
Sorry, Terry, I think my
I don't think any of us
fat
here
fingers hit the button.
were saying that fees should not be increased. Nobody's trying to strangle government. And you left out something very important. When a person comes and builds a house, or a person that's already living here does a big addition, what happens after it's completed? The property taxes are readjusted. Where does that money go? So when you're saying that all this public Monte Sereno money is going toward helping a person build a house or doing an addition or putting in a pool, the public gets back that money in property taxes. I've been here for 40 years. My property taxes per year are what the property taxes would be per month if I had a new house there. And all that money is being lost to government, citizens of Monte Sereno. Thanks.
Okay, anybody else? Philippa?
I think we all owe Daniel some kind of a medal tonight for doing all this research. He's certainly done his job. I do want to add that the people I've talked to and I feel that a cost analysis anytime fees are raised is warranted. And we're staunchly against the comparison with San Francisco, and we're staunchly against annual automatic fee raising. The studies are the way to go.
Thank you so much. Anybody else? Okay, so let me now move to council. Any more comments?
So,
Go ahead.
if I may, I mean, I don't want to pick a fight with Councilmember Alves, put in a lot of time here, but I do want to point out, I think you've fallen into data fallacies that are the ones you cautioned us against on other issues. For one, you pointed out that the cost packet change is probably a 30% difference with the Hacienda project. And that's absolutely correct. But we don't know if that's going forward this year, and if our staff is going to be able to do 65%, that 1,000 hours with no increase, and absorb all of that. If they could, and if it did, then yes, that's a huge factor there. So the problem that then leads to is that factored into this year, or should it not be factored into this year? Essentially, what you just did for us is the vast bulk of that $20,000 study you just did. The missing component is the work packet time component of the study, which was basically the study person coming in and looking at a prior year, a year before, and saying, what did you do to process a permit or to do a set of plans or these kinds of things. So the study was always running behind, where you're projecting it out into the future over a future budget year. The other one is you did take contract services. We had a nice decrease in contract services price. I didn't study the line item you looked at, but one of the big decreases in contract services was bringing on the city engineer, who was no longer a contract service and is now a staff member. If that was part of that line, then it's created a problem. So I understand what you're saying, and it's extremely helpful. The problem is, I think we can't apply that math to determine what we should have in the interim years. And that may have been your point, is that we can't find the number exactly. It may be up, it may be down. If that's the point, I can agree with that. And then the question is, do we, the citizens, absorb these changes until we get to the point of another $20,000 study? Or is there some interim step basis that does make sense that we can apply? And so and because it's skewed by Hacienda, because it's skewed by contract services, I don't think it's plug and play, or we could just do that. So it may be that we're in the position of we can't do it this year. We probably can't do it next year, because whatever Hacienda does this year or next year will also skew us. So maybe we're at the point of throwing up our hands and saying, let's wait 2, 3, 4, 5 years until we do another study, and that's fine. I just have to weigh in and say, if our costs have increased, that means everybody's paying it. One comment to Mr. Pearson's public comment, our recovery of the portion of the increased tax revenue is a tiny fraction of property tax. 5%, 3%, 2%? 2% of those increases.
5% of this or 5% of that?
So of property taxes that go to the state, we receive somewhere in the 2 to 3% range, if Andrea's number is right.
Burton's going 6.
Burton says 6. Okay. So you send $100 to Sacramento, we get $6 back. So I'm just pointing out that we, Monte Sereno, as you as part of Monte Sereno, we get a very small portion of what we pay in taxes back. That doesn't change anything. We're working with a budget. If our budget goes up and we don't recover the fees for a while, then we're just running behind, and that's fine, as long as the citizens choose and express, and that's what everybody seems to be expressing, that that's what the preference is for, is to run behind the curve on fees recovery, and that's a choice that people can make.
Can I respond?
Yes, please.
Yeah, Sean, you're wrong on the data part of, so you're missing the point of distributing fixed fees. So the overhead costs have to get spread over the fee packets. The fee packets cannot exceed the capacity of the organization, right? So if that work comes this year, then there'll be more fee packets, and the end result is that the fees should actually reduce by a fixed percentage to spread those costs over more fee packets. If that doesn't come, then okay, then it's a net, it nets out. That maybe the work quantity from the previous year to the current year has not changed. We're forecasting that it's changing. That's the only assumption that you can make today. If it gets pushed out or in some other percentage, certainly that percentage is way more than 3 to 4%, right? It's 35%. That's a huge swing on those fee amounts. To your other point with regard to the calculation of the city engineer, so that also is that, you know, what I did was the correct way to look at that, in that the city engineer, I calculated his full annual salary and then included that in that fee amount derivation. What was your other point? There was
Well, there was a big reduction in contract
then
services, but that
contract-
did relate to.
Contract services is basically also part of that fixed fee category that in our budget is under I believe it's under the category of administrative, right? I put the line item in the budget there. That, I just picked one, right? I could have picked any of them. I didn't do an analysis of what the fixed city overhead was because the study didn't break that out, so I didn't have a good reference to what they were talking about. But what I could show with that one line item is that I can swing your assumption that we're either covered or not covered on an annual basis. I can easily debunk that, you know, with one line item in the budget. And so that's basically the 2 points that I was trying to make, is that the variability of these numbers, the statement that you're making that we're somehow going to lose money is just not factually correct. We don't know if the fee structure will produce more revenue this year or less revenue this year because we haven't done the work to actually find that number out, right? So you just cannot jump to that conclusion that we're going to be somehow short and leaving money on the table. That's what that whole analysis was about.
Yeah,
Hang on, let me see, let me make sure he's done.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Councilmember Elahi.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I think it's pretty informative. And the bottom line is, and I appreciate the citizens of Monte Sereno are not saying that they don't want the permit fees to go up. What they're saying is they want to get a study done to get it to go up. And economically, to do a study, we have to wait 2 or 3 years. Otherwise, it doesn't pay for itself if you spend about $20,000 or whatever at that time. So if the permits are going to be, if that's what we need to do, it's only $20,000 more per year. So in 3 years will be, worst case, we'll be in the hole by about 60 grand. Best case, according to your theory, we'll have 60,000 more than we need. And we can, or maybe $120,000 more than we need. So perhaps we just put it over, get the study done, and get a result.
We should never have more than we need, right? You want the fees to match the services. That's the ideal. It has to
I know, but
reconcile.
you won't know that until you get the study done.
So you actually have to do some accounting to know whether the fees match the services.
Right, and that's
the work that has to be done.
Yeah, and the study was done last year, so I think we're,
So we should be very close.
yeah, the study basically told us that we need 20,000 more. Now, your numbers are part of a study, which it would be good if they had been presented at the time the consultant was here, so he could have, looked at that and done a deeper dive into that than we can right now, because we don't have all that information. But I'm comfortable if you want to wait 3 years and then say we'll do a study, or 3 to 5 years and do a study, and then decide whether we want to increase the fees or reduce the fees.
Okay, so at this point, do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make the motion that I presented in the presentation, where we go back to the original fee structure, or the original resolution, and so we can get the exact wording, but fundamentally delete the CPI components of that policy and insert a policy where we do the fee study 3 to 5 years, or sooner if appropriate, and add the car charger.
Do I have a second? Okay.
Did you,
So I made the motion. The previous resolution, the one passed on May
May
1st.
May 2018.
So you wouldn't be amending that resolution. What you can do is adopt a new resolution if you feel that's necessary. But if you're not raising any of the rates, you don't need a resolution at all. So the only thing you would need a resolution to do would be to do the EV charging station, because that is a new fee. But otherwise, you don't need a resolution if you're not increasing anything.
Well, the previous resolution has those, it basically says that annually we're going to increase by CPI. Those pieces, that piece of the policy.
But that's
has to
not
be-
binding on the city council. So if the current city council doesn't want to do that, they are not required
So
to do it.
I think part of my motion is, I think we should just remove that language.
So to clarify, it would be a motion, Kristen, are we correct? It'd be a motion to revoke and replace the prior motion with
So-
this language of Councilmember
It
Alves.
would actually just be a motion to adopt a new resolution that states whatever the council decides they want it to state.
I think I disagree. I think we should go back to the May 2018 resolution, delete 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 6 whereas, delete section 3, and then add the study, and then add that $1 fee.
So that would be a new resolution. You don't amend a resolution, it would just be adopting a new resolution.
Yes.
No, so let me just pull it up so we can do that, make sure we have it clear. So you would delete. And I'm looking at a different version, but you would delete the recital that states, whereas the city council desires that annually the city manager, ... you would delete that one.
The city council desires that annually the fees be automatically increased based on the all urban consumer price index.
Okay, so you would delete that.
Yes. Delete section 3, annually on July 1st, starting July 1st, 2019, the fee schedule shall be updated, whereby fees are increased based on the prior year annual change to the CPI. Delete that.
And then you would leave section 4, 5, 6,
There's no section 6.
and you would amend Exhibit A to only include the EV charging station.
Yes, we would also add the study.
And that would be Councilmember Laveza's
The
language.
language, yeah.
Which if you could provide that to us, that would be
Yeah,
helpful.
I mailed it to Terry already.
I have a motion by Councilmember Lavouche, a second by Mayor Pro Tem Lawler. Okay. So you should be able to vote. All votes are in. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, so the next on the agenda is new business, and we have 2 items. The first one is the city response to the Santa Clara Civil Grand Jury Report, inquiry into governance of the VTA. Terry, can we please have a staff report?
So, as is the case from time to time, the Santa Clara County Civil Grand Jury issues reports. Since I've been here, there have been one other one, which was issued last year. It was regarding the housing crisis in the Bay Area. Recently, on June 18th, this fiscal year's civil grand jury issued a report pursuant to its investigation into the governance of the Valley Transportation Authority, better known as VTA. The investigation built upon prior ones conducted in 2003 and 2004 and 2008 and 2009 by the grand juries of those times. In the grand jury report, it notes that for many years, VTA has been plagued by declining operating performance and recurring budget gaps between projected revenues and expenses, and notwithstanding significant population growth in the area, and in recent years, increased employment levels throughout much of Silicon Valley. So as is the case, always the case when the civil grand jury issues reports, they make specific findings, which I did outline in the report. The main findings they looked at the findings that had been made from the 2 grand jury reports before and built upon those, and specifically listed, which I'll just read briefly, 3 findings with this particular report and this particular grand jury regarding VTA's operating performance that has continued to deteriorate over the last 10 years relative to both its own historical performance and the performance of its peers across a wide variety of metrics. The board has consistently failed to adequately monitor VTA's financial performance and has taken action, albeit less than fully effective action, only in the face of imminent financial crises. And the final finding was, despite the serious ongoing structural financial deficit, the VTA board has been unwilling to review and reconsider decisions made years or even decades ago regarding large capital projects, and that are no longer technologically sound or financially viable. So these were the 3 main findings that they found. Now, what the civil grand juries will then do is, based on their findings, they will make recommendations, and I won't go over all of those. There were a lot of findings in the report that did not, require a response by the city, but there were specifically 3. Let me get my notes here. There were specific ones that they did ask the city to respond to. And basically, the city either responds with an agree, partially agrees, partially disagrees, or disagrees regarding the findings. And then regarding the recommendations, the city has the opportunity, has been implemented, has not been implemented, but will be implemented in the future, requires further analysis, or will not be implemented. So, here it is. The grand jury report included 1 finding and 3 recommendations that require a response from the city. And this was basically all of the cities in Santa Clara County were asked to do the exact same thing. So basically, what staff has been doing over the last month, 6 weeks, is we've been working with the other West Valley cities to discuss a coordinated response, because we have a similar, we're similarly situated in particular to the recommendations and the finding. And so we've been coordinating We actually, at the West Valley Mayors and Managers meeting last week, we were all, the mayors and the managers for the West Valley cities were together, and we discussed this as a group. So, you know, a lot has been going in to make sure that we are coordinating our efforts. And so based on all of this coordination, staff did put together a response, which is drafted and attached to the staff report here. I'm just going to talk about it in broad brush terms. In general, some other cities, Saratoga, Cupertino, Palo Alto, are pushing back a bit more than we're recommending for the recommendations. And part of the reason for that is the city is continuing to work with VTA. We are trying to get VTA on board with a package of improvements that would include widening Highway 17 in an effort to hopefully help with some of the beach traffic. So coordinating with the town of Los Gatos, while we are definitely, you know, recommend that the letter include pushing back on their recommendations, I would say ours is a slightly softer pushback than you might have seen if you've seen the responses from other cities, the ones that I mentioned. So what happens is once the council approves a response, we then forward it back on to the civil grand jury by the deadline. So with that, I am available for questions if you have any.
Questions? Do I have none?
Just comments, I guess, if you want to take comments. Yeah, VTA, the way the board is comprised, I think it's 15 directors, and 3 are from the county and 5 are from the city of San Jose, and then the remaining 6 or 7 are from all the smaller cities. So the smaller cities like us and Palo Alto and everybody else feels like they get the short end of the stick in any deal that comes up with the VTA board. And the board is fairly dysfunctional. That's why you have a pretty hard grand jury report that has come out. So we're taking the softer approach. I understand the diplomacy behind it. I don't know if it's going to do us any good one way or the other, because those people just do what they want to do. And at some point, the valley's transportation system is just totally broke, and you know, steps need to be taken to improve that. So that's my comment.
Do we make a motion or what?
Yes, and then
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve? Second? Second? Oh,
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lawler. I have a second by Mayor Turner. Okay, you should be able to vote. If all votes are in, the motion passes 5-0.
okay, let's now move to an update on the state housing legislation from Kirsten.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. As the council is undoubtedly aware, housing is a significant problem in the state of California. And Monte Sereno has been following the legislation that is making its way through Sacramento. Last April, the council created an ad hoc committee made up of Mayor Turner and Councilmember Elahi. I've been working with them on keeping tabs on those laws that are working their way through the convoluted legislative process in Sacramento. And this draft report, or the staff report in front of you, includes a summary of the most critical bills that currently may affect Monte Sereno. The legislative session will end on July 13th, so any bills that are passed will need to be acted on, can be vetoed by the governor within 30 days of the September 13th date. Just a little background, the state over the years has continued to pass laws that affect the city's ability to approve housing, regulate housing, some would argue determine what's most appropriate in different cities, and they tend to try to apply a one-size-fits-all mentality that, as we know in Monte Sereno, doesn't always work. And so one of the requirements that the city has is that we adopt a housing element. That's part of our general plan that regulates how we're going to provide housing in the city of Monte Sereno. We are also required to meet what's called the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, which is a number that's calculated and brought down to the city through various levels. And it's basically an obligation to provide adequate sites for housing. It's not an obligation to build housing. The city doesn't build housing. We only provide sites. Our most famous site is probably the Hacienda site that was used to meet our multifamily housing requirement from our current housing element. The city is in compliance with the housing element. We continue to reach our goals annually, and we are on track to do so through the end of this planning cycle in 2023. At a future meeting, I believe October 1st, or maybe later in October, the city will be considering joining a sub-region, which may help us with the regional housing needs assessment in the future, but that's also something that staff is working on. So just wanted to give you an update on various things. There are a lot of issues out there that staff is working on to make sure that we keep on top of all of the issues. Specifically, just to run through the bills that you have in front of you, the most critical are probably SB 33 and SB 592. SB 592 was authored by Wiener, and it is surprisingly similar to SB 50. It has been a gut and replace, I think is what they have called it. It was at one time a cosmetology bill, and now all of a sudden it has turned into a housing bill that does, could potentially restrict our ability to deny projects. It is couched as a modification to the Housing Accountability Act, which already takes away some of the city's discretion in approving projects that are consistent with the general plan and the zoning of particular properties. This would further expand that to include ministerial projects, permits, and accessory dwelling units. So we are keeping an eye on that. The league is recommending that we oppose it unless it's amended. SB 330 is also of importance to us. It relates to fees, and it basically freezes fees in place. Typically, development impact fees get adjusted annually like other fees. This bill would stop that, so the fees would be the fees that were in place at the time that you applied, not necessarily the fees that are effect at the time your project is approved. Another bill of potential interest is the density bonus, and it would increase the bonus that developers could receive if they provide a mostly affordable project. Currently, under state law, you can get increases up to, I believe, 50%, depending on the type of affordability level. So if your density is 10, you could potentially go up to 15 if you met those requirements. This would increase that even more. It would be up to 80% bonus. So if you had a 10-unit project, it could be an 18-unit project. There are a few finance-related bills, probably not applicable to us in the near term, but they relate to bonds and state-approved affordable housing projects. The city doesn't usually get involved in those types of things, but that is something that the league is watching. And then the final issues would relate to the accessory dwelling units. That is something that we are watching. We did adopt a new accessory dwelling unit ordinance a few years ago to be consistent with state law. These bills would continue to erode the city's ability to determine what's appropriate in terms of design, location, setbacks, those types of things. So we are keeping an eye on that as well. And if there are any questions, I am available to answer them.
Any questions? Yes.
So I have a question. The kind of action item or call to action on these, or the position is oppose or oppose unless amended. Can we or should we, as a council, act to bring this to the citizens' attention? And should we be currently suggesting that if citizens care about one or more of these bills, they should be reaching out to their Sacramento representatives and providing that information to them? What process could we or should we go through to to make sure that we publicize or make sure that people have the information on this. And are these bills that you've got summarized here on this September review calendar, they will live or die by this legislative session? So are these urgent things that we should be speaking about in the next couple of weeks?
They are currently on the cycle, but they can, and many of them have been moved out and pushed back for 2 years. So it's really a constantly changing environment up there. The city council can always send the letters in opposition, and in fact, the league oftentimes provides form letters to city councils to submit to their representatives. That's something that the ad hoc committee might want to look into doing in the future. Another way to get the citizens involved would be to give an update kind of like this, where anyone could send letters of concern to their representatives, and we could include the contact information in a staff report. You could, using your new social media policy, you could also include it on the social media, or perhaps in a newsletter or the city's website.
But in terms of this cycle, we're really looking at a quick turnaround. So if we want to get this information out, just so people weighing in on either side of any of these issues has those contacts, we could probably push it out quickly through social media is probably better than city action.
And we could link it to this staff report, because that would have the bills with the recommended action.
Can we have a form letter that Council Member Elahi and I can draft for the citizens to use to?
So that gets a little
Especially-
bit political in terms of your advocacy for a particular piece of legislation. It may be better to just refer them to other websites that might have resources that they could use. The city could always prepare its own, and if somebody wanted to use parts of that letter, they could, but we wouldn't be specifically advocating, here, use our form letter.
Okay. I think the two bills here, SB 330 and 592, are the ones to watch. And a lot of the citizens think that Monte Sereno will not be affected, but that's not true, because the bill says that if you're near major transit, which we are, or a job-rich area, then we could be affected, right?
It's my understanding that under SB 50, it would not have affected us, because it has to do, it would exclude areas like Monte Sereno. SB 592 uses a lot of that similar language, but I would caution that this is only the beginning. If he doesn't get it this time, he'll modify it and make changes again. So it doesn't hurt, even if it doesn't specifically to apply to us now, it doesn't hurt to make others in the legislature aware of the concerns, in case the next round is more prohibitive than the current round.
And just to add, and to date regarding transit, none of the bills have met the threshold for our transit locally for headways or frequency, at least currently. It doesn't mean they couldn't change it.
So this is just a staff report, so we don't have to do a motion, right? Okay, so our next order of business is commission report. Thank you for your great report, by the way. And I guess this will be your last meeting with the council.
Thank you.
So thank you. The next order of business is the committee commissions report. Anyone? No? Council member comments? Ooh, I like this. Next order of business is the city manager report.
I just have two things. We've sent out notices for a community meeting for the Dave's Avenue neighborhood regarding traffic circulation, pedestrian, bicycle safety. I've been talking to the city council about this. City staff has been working with the Better Streets Commission. There's a number of ideas they've come up with. And so we're going to be holding a community meeting Thursday, September 19th, 7 p.m., Dave's Avenue Elementary School, multipurpose room. And all of the residents around the school, as well as all of the parents of students, are being invited to come, and the city's hosting a community meeting to inform and solicit input from those folks I just mentioned regarding improvements to reduce traffic congestion during drop-off and pickup times and improve pedestrian bicycle safety in the area. So this is kind of the next step, the progression in getting input from the the users, we can call them, or the stakeholders, in order to continue to move forward with ideas that we will ultimately bring to the city council. And the idea is we would actually hold a joint meeting with the Better Streets Commission, the city council at the same time to talk about, what would be the next steps. So that's happening Thursday, September the 19th. And just related to that, we're also pushing out a survey for folks who aren't able to come, which gives a little more details on the proposed changes, and asks some general questions about bike, pedestrian, and vehicular safety. So we're trying to do a two-pronged approach, reaching out to people who can't come to the meeting through a survey, and as well as getting results at the meeting itself.
Excuse me, are you mailing to a specific neighborhood around
Yes,
this?
yes, it was specifically targeted to the neighborhood directly around Dave's, but we're also sending it to any person who is a parent of school children. So we wanted to get the largest stakeholder group that we could. And the only other thing I want to mention is that the council, of course, approved or awarded the contract for the neighborhood improvement project for the 3 streets. And the kickoff meeting for the neighborhood is tomorrow night at 5:30. And some of the preliminary work has begun. It's none of the heavy work. But we're, just like we did last year with Blanchard, we're inviting the neighbors to come. The contractor will be here. We'll have all the specific details on the engineered drawings, as well as information on how it will all proceed, who to contact if you have problems. It's what we did last year. It was very successful. We were able to engage the neighborhood before the main work started.
May I ask a question? ClearGov, when are we going to see a change to our website that would have?
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I just got an email from them today. They have put in some preliminary data, and it just came later today, so I haven't got a chance to look at the email in depth. But I think they asked us a couple of questions, which I have to take a look at. But it should be shortly.
Okay, so then we'll let you guys know that you'll really like the front end to the Monte Sereno website. I know, Philippa, you keep complaining about our website, that it's not easy to find, so some of these things may help. Not completely, but may help.
That's all I had.
Okay, so our next order of business is future agenda items. Our next meeting is October the 8th at 7 o'clock.
October the 1st.
Oh, October the 1st, sorry. Since we have no further business, let's move to adjourn. The meeting is adjourned. Let's eat.